Hey guys, it's mcfixit here. We're going to be working on this Enigma and doing a stencil die on it. It's going to look really sweet in the end. I'm going to go through all the tools and supplies and exactly how I do this. So we'll go through the tools first. The first thing you'll want is a disc. White disc tend to work really well, especially if you're going to leave different parts of it white. So you're going to want a white disc. We will need to remove the stamp, so you're going to want to get some acetone. Then we'll need to cut the stencil, so you'll need the Cricut and to cut your stencil. So this is just a printed copy of what is on here. You're going to need some transfer paper. This comes in a big long roll. All I did was fold it in half twice and drew a circle around it just to give me a better idea on where it's at. You'll need plenty of paper towels and gloves. I'm using an electric burner for this one, and an old pan. This is a very short cord, not plugged in yet. You're not going to want to plug it in until it's time. We're going to be using iDye poly, and so we're going to be using the black and the red, and I'll show you how I mix it. It's just half of one of the little packets in a decent sized jar, and so again, half a packet, warm water inside of a jar. You do want to make sure it's a glass jar, but I'm not using any kind of acetone or anything on it. It's just water. Then I use some Dawn dish soap and water to help clean things up. You're going to need a couple of tools. You're going to need something to weed. This is just a basic pick, and this is what comes with your Cricut. It just scrapes it. You may want a Sharpie. A pair of scissors is always helpful from time to time to cut packages and stuff like that. Then I created this. This is just a piece of plywood and a 3D print, and it just helps me set up the disc a little straighter and flatter. You can also use this on a spin die too, so it's pretty cool if you know somebody that has a 3D printer. It just helps me kind of get a little bit better when you're putting the transfer paper on there with that stencil to get it exactly what it needs to be. So the first thing I like to do is just kind of get my work area set up, and you're not going to want to have all this close because you don't want to ruin any of your stuff. So just go ahead and spread everything out a bit. We are going to take off the stamp first. So go ahead and get on some gloves. If you did want to keep some of the stamp, you definitely can do that. Blue painter's tape works pretty well as long as you go away from it. So if you wanted to save any of it, you could. But for this die, I am not going to do that. So just pretty much about one little chunk full, and it will kind of disintegrate the stamp pretty well. You're always going to have a little bit of remnant left. It's just kind of how it happens. But you do want to work relatively quick so none of this does dye into the disc, this purple, and so it stays nice and white. So just keep at it. You can also use rags and stuff. I would definitely use a rag that has not been used on other things. And so you're starting to see it get pretty clean now. This one does have kind of a cool looking marbling to it. Some of them do that. I don't know why. I have a method that I dyed a while ago that has some pretty cool marbling to it as well. So once you got that nice and clean and it's white again, we're not really going to use the acetone again, so I'm going to put that off to the side. At this point, I do like to clean off my disc with just some Dawn dish soap and water, just to make sure none of that acetone is still on there. Just one little spray. And with that, I just put a couple of drops of Dawn dish soap in a spray bottle with water. Nothing special, but that's starting to look really good there. And this is a slightly used disc, and so yeah, that is all set up. So I'm going to set that off to the side now. Our next thing is we're going to take that water, and so this is just warm water filled up pretty far in this jar. And I did have to switch out jars, so this is the same size as the other one, just a little different top. You do want to make sure it has a top. So as you pull this out, you can see this one has been used just a touch. So the goal is, if you didn't have that, to cut it and pour about half of this dye in. So we're pretty close to half. I used this for a stencil die not too long ago on a spin die, and so I did use just a little bit of it. But we'll go ahead and stick that guy back in. Little Ziploc bags are really good. I've already done this to the black one right here, but did want to show you kind of the process. You just put your lid on, some of them screw on. Since this is not a screw lid, I'm going to be very cautious and put a paper towel over it and hold it down nice and firm, because you can see it's already starting to come off the sides. Probably should have used that other one, but I don't use red a ton on the spin dies, so, or on stencil dies. I keep saying the wrong words today. It's early. So that's looking good to me now. Go ahead and toss that over there. Since those are both set up, we're going to throw that over here. Put those right next to each other. So this is probably the most time-consuming part of all of it, and that is getting the stencil how it's supposed to be. So I always set a printed version off to the side. The other thing I sometimes do is write on it if there's certain parts you know you want to keep. So we have to do the black one first. So it's going to be hard to see on here, but anything black we want to make sure we go ahead and take out. I am going to put a W on both of the eyes so I know that it is white. And so that will just help me. And the teeth are going to stay white, but we're going to go ahead and pull off everything that is black that we want dyed black. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to go ahead and kind of go right to left for the most part. And so a lot of this is connected because it's a spider web. So you do kind of want to be careful. It's also a good place to have some scissors. So you can just kind of cut it a couple of locations so you're not pulling the whole thing. Well, now it just wanted to pull the whole thing at once. This just helps me kind of stay accurate to what I want to do. And then I'll get the next side after I can kind of pay attention to it. It's not going to hurt anything doing it like this. But yeah, this whole thing is just wanting to come up at once, which is fine. But again, you do have the option of using some scissors. And so this is where you're going to want to make sure you press down a little bit. That was starting to come up. I did accidentally leave this in my garage for about the last 2 days. I don't like to do that with cut stencils. I don't get as good of a pull up normally when I do that. So I'm just going to cut some of this off just so I can work on it a little better. Just ball that up. And this is a transparent 6150. I'm not certain if I said that. I sometimes love these and sometimes hate these. I do like the white ones a bit better. They tend to just work better for me, but I had a bunch of these lying around. They are easier to see when you're placing it on the disc though, so I mean it does have some perks. But the white ones seem to be a little more sticky, which I do like. And see, if you go too fast, you're going to miss parts like this right here that didn't want to stay down. So you can kind of use your weed tool sometimes like I did there to help press it back down. Now this is a huge chunk that's going to be black. So do just kind of take your time as you do it. And some of these little weird cuts sometimes don't like to come up well. So use whatever you have to kind of get it to work. And I'm probably going to cut it again just to make sure I get a good, accurate chunk. So that was a big chunk that came off. Again, the white ones are easier to see on camera too. But again, I just had these. So that's what I'm doing today. So I am going to spend a few seconds pushing these down in to the paper behind it, just to make sure it wants to come off properly. And always keep looking back over, making sure you're doing it correct. So sometimes the teeth won't want to stay down, so you got to help kind of push it back down. So again, it's all about taking your time, making sure it looks exactly how you want it to. And I've never got one of these perfect, but I have got them to look really good in the past. So just, again, take your time. When you gotta cut, just cut it. It's totally fine. Always have a trash can nearby. So this right here I think is going to be the most difficult part because it's got the most curvy pieces that are small. And so I'm going to work from the back side, I think, hoping that some of that sticks, and none of it did. Again, I think the white transparent, or the white paper tends to hold on to the back of this a little better. I think that's partly why I like them. Because these little parts are just not wanting to stick well. Which I'm not too concerned about them because they're not a huge part of the design. Okay, so if you can see there, it does look like maybe one or two of those little pieces did not hold on well, which again, it's fine. I'm not too concerned about them. Actually, I might be able to peel this one off. Sometimes you get lucky and you can kind of peel it off and replace it. Because it did pop out, it just didn't want to stick because it's so small. The straighter edges seem to go really smooth pulling them out. Some of these curved edges, they just get stuck a little more. I can't get it, so I'm not worried. So that looks, I think, pretty awesome right there. I will go back and just kind of double check, making sure all of it looks like it is where it's supposed to be. And so far, all that looks great. So I have not pulled up the red side. That is very important that you do not do that yet, because we have to do really technically 2 dyes here. So we're going to dye everything black, and then we're going to go over the parts that are white that we want red next. And so we'll pull those off secondly. And so this does have a pretty good design on the outside. And so I'm hoping I can simply take the transfer paper and be able to, and you can't really see through it that well. So I probably am going to add some different markings on this, specifically with the disc. Just to help me line this up properly. And so that is the disc, just drawing around it. And that should help me line up. So a lot of times this is blue like this is, if it is the white 5160, but with this transparent one, sometimes it does become a bit more difficult to see. So there's a couple of ways you can lay down your transfer paper. I always try to experiment with new ways, just trying to get it as good as I possibly can. And in fact, I think what I want to do is I'm going to slightly fold this on the edges just to give me some additional marks to kind of help tell me where halfway is. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side as well. So I'm not really folding it in half, but kind of just helping myself get as accurate as possible, because this one will be noticeable if you're off, and it's pretty easy to get off. So I'm gonna have to put my head under the camera for a second. I do apologize. It just helps you get lined up a little bit better. So I did not put that on super straight. So I'm not gonna follow the lines on this part. I'm gonna follow the lines on the other part. So I hope that makes sense. It kind of already stuck a little bit, which can definitely happen. So here's where I'm going to go ahead and use this. I do kind of want it pretty centered with the disc. And then we will go ahead and peel one of these corners back and slowly begin to pull this back, making sure everything we want to come up comes up. And there are some times, like right here, this did not come up properly. So you go back, scrape it back down on there. Sometimes you get really lucky your first time and the whole thing comes up. Other times you spend a bit of time scraping it and making sure it all comes off properly. And I have noticed pulling this at about a 45-degree angle tends to be my best bet. So I'm giving you guys a side camera angle so I can look directly up and at it properly, because it really is important that you get it perfectly lined up. And once you feel that you are as lined up as you can be, go ahead and begin to press it down and on there. And then we'll go ahead and remove this piece. And then we're going to go ahead and scrape all of the bubbles out of it. Kind of working our way from the center out. And just knowing this design, it is, when I pull this off, I'm going to try to like kind of peel it back, but the whole center part wheels is just going to come off most likely. But this is the way I normally do it. I kind of put it onto the center of it, but because of the design of this, it is just kind of going to do what it wants, because I do have that cut mark real close to the edge. So you're just slowly peeling this all the way around. Again, go ahead. Nope, it didn't all the way come off. So you got to press it in really good to get that vinyl to stick to the disc. And this is a newer transfer paper, and so sometimes it does want to stick a bit more than a transfer paper that's been used a few times. And so this is the side of Venom right here. You can see it's coming off pretty well. And then this is the side with the Spider-Man, and it's coming off pretty well. I did lose one of the bigger pieces up here, so we'll go ahead and hit that one in. And sometimes you do have to turn the disc at a bit of an angle to be able to see if it's coming with this transparent 5160 vinyl. But so far that is looking, oh, just a little bit more on the edges right here, and I think we are good. So there's one piece that did not come up, so I am going to take that back. There's only one piece, I think. This one right here. So I'm going to try to peel it up, and I think it's because it was sitting there on the edge kind of weird. And go ahead and place it back down and on properly. So before you ruin your vinyl, you are going to want to put it on the blue side, or your transfer paper, and save that for another day. Those are good for many, many uses. So I'm going to give you back to the overhead view. And we are going to peel off the part that's on the back, because it's really not going to do as much of any good. And so it should come off pretty easy. And so hopefully you can kind of see the design on there right now. We have a lot of pressing down to get all of these air bubbles out. Air bubbles don't necessarily matter if they're in the very center, but anything next to the edge, an air bubble is kind of your worst enemy, because it will leak under that, and it just won't look good. So just go ahead and press down. You can use your scraper tool. Just kind of try to go the same direction with the scraper tool so you don't accidentally mess any of it up. You don't have to kill it, you're just getting the air bubbles out. And sometimes it helps to have gloves, and sometimes it helps not to. I think the heat transfer from your fingers rubbing against it sometimes does help it, so I am going to take off my glove right now. And just making sure all of it's pressed down really good. I'm going to try to show you this one bubble in the center. I'm not worried about it because it is in like the dead center of the eye. And sometimes if you try too hard to get it out, you can mess up your design. I'm going to try just for a few seconds, but I'm just going to leave it. Kind of keep it pushed back to the center, because you don't want to be pressing so hard on this that you accidentally cut a hole in it. That's why I do like to use it, but I do use it a little sparingly. It seems like I've had better success just pressing it. Seems like it just really kind of pushes down and into the plastic a little firmer. And I do think the heat from your hand does kind of help, especially on a cold day like today. So this part that you just got to take a lot of patience, because if you just throw it in there real quick, and it's just not going to do a whole lot of good. So actually, while I'm doing this, I'm going to go ahead and start this. So I put a good chunk of the black in first. Always go from your darkest to your lightest color, because I do want to make sure this heats up. The goal of this hotbed is not to boil it, but it is just to where it starts to smoke. And this little electric skillet works super well. I do want to fill it up about half of this container full of the solution, because I don't want it to go way over the edge. We may have to put just a touch of spin dye on the end of this to get it to do what I want it to do around the edges. So I just turn this on. You don't even have to turn it on very far. Do like 2.5. And then as that begins to heat up, you can see when it starts to smoke, we're going to go ahead and turn it off. So again, you're just kind of continuing to push down, get all those air bubbles out that you can. And you sometimes have to turn it at some different angles to be able to see the air bubbles a little more. And really, whenever any of them are right next to the edge, those are the ones you care the most about. Or any little creases that are next to the edge, just go ahead and keep pushing those down, getting those air bubbles out. So that has not started to smoke yet, but it will any second now. It only takes a few moments. I do have this little piece here. I'm going to go ahead and knock it off because I lost the one before it and after it. So this is an opportunity as well to make sure it is everything exactly how you want it to be on the die. You don't really have an opportunity after that. And I just noticed I have a really small hair in here. So I know this wasn't on the parts list, but sometimes needle nose work really well. There's a little bit of junk on it from a previous project. Or tweezers, which I don't think I have nearby, but I do want to get that out. Okay, now we're ready to go ahead, and I'm just going to take it off of there. This is a woodwork table. Do not do this if it's something that can burn or catch fire. I mean, wood can catch fire, but it's not going to on this. And then I go ahead and take the disc and slowly lower it down in and just let it float. You don't have to do any pressing down because I don't want it really on the back side much. Go ahead and let that sit for at least 5 minutes. 5 minutes. So now that it has been just 5 minutes, I'm going to go ahead and pull it up out of it. And I'm just going to go ahead and kind of set it down real quick. And then begin to wipe it. So you can see that the black lines where they are, I do like how that turned out. Sometimes you do want to leave it in a bit longer, but that actually looks really, really solid. So I'm just going to go ahead, put this up here for 1 second. And then I'm going to go ahead and spray it off just lightly. And then just lightly wipe off just to kind of stop any of the black from getting any more on there and the rim. Then we'll go ahead and dump the black back into the container. I use a little old funnel for this. And then you will want a rag nearby because I seem to always make a mess. Not too bad today. That's pretty good. Go ahead and wipe the edge. And then we do want to clean out the inside because we do want to make the red show up well, and we don't want it to be too dark, which could easily happen if we left all this sediment in the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and just set that off to the side because that does need to kind of dry or cool down before I put the cap on it. I'm going to hit this up with just a couple sprays of Dawn dish soap and water. And that really does help kind of just get that cleaning. I love me some Dawn dish soap. You can even get the off-brand stuff. It doesn't matter. But Dawn does work very well. We'll do one more pass at it just to make sure we get as much up as possible. Do not ever use this pan again for cooking. You can tell this one has lots of nicks and dings in it. This is a very old pan, so don't try to reuse them. Not worth it. You don't want to die, and I don't want you to die. So we're kind of all in this together. So I dye poly red, and go ahead and pour it in, just like so. Now this one does not need to be super deep. Actually, I'm going to put just a touch more in. There we go, right there. Then we'll go ahead and put it back up. And again, you can spill and make a huge mess with all of this. So be in a place you can actually do that. And we'll go ahead and plug you back in. And go ahead and turn it on to about 3. Now, remembering, this is a 2-step dye. We want to only get the parts that we want red. So we'll go ahead and start peeling all of these back. It's one of the reasons I put a W on the 2 big parts that I want to stay white. Obviously, we want the teeth to stay white on Venom as well. So far, this is looking really good. This stuff does stick a little bit better when you've got it in that warm water dye poly mix. So that is one thing to remember. You're going to have to peel a little harder than what you did when it was just from the transfer paper. I am really liking how this turned out already. Every time you do this is kind of an experiment, even if you've done it many times, because some of this kind of has a mind or a life of its own. Just remember not to take out on this side the eye of Spider-Man, unless you want that to be red. But I want it to be white just to give it that little bit of extra pop. And you can see how this transparent stencil does kind of get dyed. You can see it was clear, now it's kind of almost black. So this is starting to heat up over here. Give it a little bit of a shake, and as soon as I start seeing smoke, which actually is right now, I don't know how much you can see on that, but it is just barely starting to smoke, I'll go ahead and turn that off and unplug it. I do kind of work to where I won't potentially stab the eye as well. You saw me rotate it there. That was intentional, just to kind of keep myself from accidentally, because this little pick is pretty sharp, and the last thing you want to do is ruin it because you were trying to go too fast. So this just kind of helps prevent a little bit of that. And if you do ever forget what your disc is, you can kind of turn it at an angle, and I'll show you that a little bit later to really be able to see what this disc was, because it will still hold some of the previous actual factory stamp kind of parts on it. In fact, you can see a 12, 5, -1, 1 right there. And so you still will be able to see some of it, which is kind of cool, especially if you've been throwing it for a while. Then don't throw it for a while and you just kind of have forgot exactly what your disc did. And this stuff does get kind of sticky on your hands, so if you ever do need to just peel it all off and throw it away, go for it. It can kind of build up quick with how many chunks we're pulling off. And I'm not really stabbing into the plastic, I'm just trying to get just underneath the vinyl. So it may look like I'm jabbing at it, I'm really honestly not. And you can see, like even right here where my middle finger on my left hand is, it does have some areas that are not 100% perfect, which is fine. This probably corner is going to be the same way. Not as clear of a line as I would like, but it's okay. That does happen with all of these kind of stencil dies if you don't get it perfectly pushed down. So that looks really awesome so far. Obviously, we're only doing the parts that we're going to dye red, and so we're going to go ahead and put it down in there. So I'm going to stir it up one last time, make sure we're good and stirred up. Then we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to set it down in there for 5 minutes. So same thing, you're not pushing it down over the edge, just sitting it down on there. And I am going to try to clean that up real quick. I don't know if you see that on the edge there. I don't really want that on there. So I am going to try to pull up as much of that dye as possible without doing any other damage. Go ahead and let that sit for at least 5 more minutes. Okay, well here is the moment of truth. We're going to go ahead and scoot that over. Go ahead and get some paper towels ready. And we'll go ahead and pick it up out. Oh yeah, that's going to look amazing. So I'm just going to set that down for a second. Go ahead and scoot this over here. Go ahead and spread this out a bit. And we'll go ahead and flip it over. Spray it down a little bit. And I don't want to mix the colors, so I'm just going to kind of tap on it a little. And then we'll go ahead and hit up this back edge. This was the only thing I had some concern if we were going to have to do a spin dye, but it really hasn't changed color much. Just that little teeny tiny bit that I kind of messed up on. So we'll go ahead and scoot that towel out of the way and begin to peel it up and check out our final product here. So remember, this part's only going to have the big eye. So the only place I think we might have some issue is right here where it says distance driver, if anything got under it, but not really too much. So that's a big piece you can just pull straight up. Then we need to go ahead and get this eye from Venom. With all the curves, it does make it a little harder to pull some of this up, just like it was harder to make sure it was nice and flat and straight. And you will notice that the black is not as black as it was because of what we did, but that's okay. That red will kind of neutralize just a touch of that color. when you're doing a double die. I guess you could put a bunch of painter's tape down and hope that it worked, but I kind of liked how this turned out. Still got a little bit more to do, but not much. And then we always clean it off one last time. A lot of vinyl you got to get up on this, all these little teeth here, but I think it does make the design look pretty cool. Especially since he has real big teeth in all the comics and the movies. And looks like I got 4 more little pieces, and then we'll clean it off one last time, making sure everything is up and good. Since I had so much of that vinyl on my hand, I went ahead and just pulled it off. Little spray down real quick. One last final wipe. Clean off the inside. That thing turned out pretty awesome. And like I said, you can kind of still see where it says Enigma and the Neoplastic and the numbers and obviously Discmania Evolution. But I hope this was helpful. If you do have any comments, please go ahead and put them down in the comment section below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Appreciate you guys. Please make sure you like and comment and watch some of my other videos that are out there as well. It does really help my channel. Thank you guys.